Have you ever been in the midst of working through your charitable giving and have had questions about, okay, how does this impact taxes? How does this impact year end? Well, today we have something really special prepared for you, because today we are sitting with our financial health director to be able to speak to that in our lives as we come to the end of this year, as we near the end of this year, and as we move through the home initiative. Now, Vinny is the financial health director, as I said, here at our church, our stewardship director here at our church, and does an amazing job of that. But Vinny, if you would, for those of us who aren't aware, what is a financial health director?
Firstly, thanks for having me on, Chris. I love talking about this. I could talk about this all day. But I stepped into this role about 18 months ago. So I'm the director of financial health and stewardship. And in that, I'm responsible for about 3 or 4 main areas of responsibility. First one is education, which the primary curriculum is Financial Peace University, or FPU, which many of our people in our family have taken it. It's an incredible course. It's 9 weeks, very practical, and goes into the basics of how to handle finances in a way that is wise and not necessarily in a way that our culture tells us to. Another part is one-to-one coaching or counseling. And in that, I talk to people on all ends of the income spectrum. I talk to people who are really struggling. And in that role, I work with a benevolence team, because there may just be some people who need direct financial help.
And that's a big part of why we give as well, to be able to help in those moments.
Absolutely. And we're really called to do that. And on the other end of the scale, I talk to people with net worth of 7, maybe even 8 figures, and we talk through what the Bible teaches us about leaving a legacy, about doing things with our money, not just for ourselves, but for other people as well. And related to that, I'm also the primary person to engage with our givers and donors.
Specifically today, we want to talk about, okay, how do we, as we walk through this year, and as we're in the midst of a home initiative, how do we take advantage of some of the unique opportunities that this year provides because of the CARES Act? And for some of our listeners, they may not have any understanding of what that is, but what does that mean? What's happening that changes things in this year?
Good question. I'm going to start this segment with, I am not a certified tax professional, nor am I a certified financial planner. So the things that I'm going to talk about, I think applies to a lot of people, but just based on your unique and individual circumstances, if you have a tax professional or financial planner, we're really just prompting you to have that conversation with them.
Yes.
If you don't, and you want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it. You can email me, Vinny with a Y at HobokenGrace.com. We can sit down. I can point you to some professionals to talk about it further. But because there are nuances in every situation that the advice may not apply. But there's a couple of things. Firstly, if you don't itemize, and this is just a lot of people, I think 7 in 10 Americans don't itemize. If you don't itemize, you get the chance to take a $300 deduction, even if you don't itemize. So those of you who are already giving, that's just free money you got to make sure you get early next year. But perhaps the bigger impact this year is that with the CARES Act, normally in any given year, you're able to deduct up to 60% of your annual adjusted income. But this year, that goes up to 100%. So depending on your circumstance, so maybe you're expecting higher income this year versus next year. Maybe you're giving out of stored resources. So there are situations where you may want to bring forward your deduction this year as opposed to doing it next year. Another thing that people
In other
might,
words, to give this year as opposed to next year because of the fact that you have that higher level, especially if you're giving out of stored resources.
absolutely, yeah, because you can deduct more of it this year than potentially next year. And another thing that people might want to look at is if you're kind of on the cusp of that standard deduction, which was dramatically raised with the last tax changes, you may want to front load or bunch up your giving this year and do it this year as opposed to spreading it out over 2 years and take the standard deduction next year. And then you can almost double in certain circumstances the amount of deduction you can take this year.
Exactly. And for those of you who don't know, the CARES Act was actually passed this year or put into place this year because of the fact that with everything that we're going through economically, there was a concern for nonprofits. And how do we ensure that those nonprofits are able to continue to function, are able to thrive? And so they increased this to encourage charitable giving as we moved through this time. And we want to, the scriptures call us to be as innocent as doves and as shrewd as snakes. We want to be wise in the way that we handle these things. And some people might ask, well, why are you doing this? Well, we want to be a good steward means that you care about things like this as well. And you care about making the most and leveraging everything that God has given us in this way. And as we talk through this doesn't just, for those of you who are business owners, this doesn't just increase the deduction for individuals. It actually increases the deduction for businesses who are giving to charity as well. And so I believe it's an increase from 10% to 25% as it pertains to businesses. And so if you're in that situation, that may impact you as far as how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, you actually bring up another really interesting thing that I want to just take a minute to talk about. I had the privilege of looking at every single one of our home commitment cards, and I saw the comments in them. Many of them I've known the personal stories. And one of my favorite cards in the home commitment card was from an individual in our family who has spent years building up this business. And they wanted to give 10% of the business through the home commitment. And I just really celebrated the heart of that because they were just dedicating themselves, their efforts to God, and I love that so much. In previous years, that's where we would have stopped because we would have just said, well, you got to go talk to somebody about figuring out how to do that. But this year, we've been able to find a partner who can help us process that transaction. So that business owner is now talking to our partner about the various options in which to execute that in a really efficient way and in a way that really changes their legacy and the legacy of our church long term, and but do it in a very practical way. So they've got an army of lawyers and figure out how to do this.
Yep.
And in many ways, the business owner can keep control of the business because we as a church don't want to get into the business of running and owning stakes in businesses and managing them. So they do it in a way that is retains management control for the owner, but do it in a really tax efficient way. And that applies to real estate. Maybe you're working at a startup, you have pre-IPO shares or options. This partner of ours can work through any of those situations. Antiques, art, all sorts of very interesting assets.
Yeah, and it's just another way of, okay, how do I leverage everything? Because Jesus is called, how do we leverage everything for the mission? And you mentioned something there. You talked about stocks. If you could just speak to that for a moment, as far as people giving in that unique way, because we've had a number of people who've begun to give that way as we've moved through this home initiative.
Yeah, giving through stocks. I love giving through stocks personally, because you may have invested money, and because the market has after initial dip, kind of around April time, it's gone back up. The market has gone up a lot. You may want to take some money off the table to reduce your exposure, or maybe you get compensated as part of through company stock, and you don't want to hold that for risk concentration purposes. For whatever reason, if you own stock, especially stock that you've held for more than a year, you can give in a really tax efficient way. So let me go through an example. Maybe you got it at $10 and it's now $20. If you wanted to give that, you could sell, but you'd have to pay capital gains on the $10 that it's increased in value. So the end organization might only get $17 to $18. But if you give stock either through a foundation or a donor advice fund, or if you give it directly to the nonprofit realizes $20 of the full value, but the giver or you will get $20 of tax deduction. So you've avoided the capital gains tax in that.
Not only have you avoided the capital gains tax, you also get the deduction.
You get the full deduction, and the nonprofit gets the full value of it.
Yeah, and that's what makes it almost a no-brainer if you are invested in that way. And I would advise you to talk to, if you have a financial advisor, to talk to them about, okay, when would be the best time to do that as we move through this fall and as we look towards the beginning of the year, and to make sure that we're just being, again, wise in that way.
Definitely.
To be able to make the most of to be able to make the most of those opportunities. As we come to an end, is there any other things that you would like to call our attention to, or just say, okay, we need to be aware of this as we move forward?
Yeah, there's a couple of other tips I think I would give, and just make everybody aware of. Another great way is to give recurringly, because as we talk about every Sunday, those things that are important to us, we automate from the top, so that it doesn't have to be this massive battle every month or every paycheck, whether I'm going to give or not. We make the decision to do it, and then it's automated. But a great way of doing that is through ACH. So doing it directly from the bank account rather than through a card. Because every time there's a giving through a card, whether that's credit or debit card, so this processing fee applies even to debit cards, we are charged a 2.7% transaction fee. So that really impacts what we can do with the giving from people. So last year we paid, I think, more than $30,000 in processing fees, and I'd love for us not to pay that, because with every ACH or bank transaction, we only pay 50 cents.
Right.
So I'd love people to, if you're currently giving through cards, I'd love for you to convert that to ACH, and you can do that on the PushPay part of our website, hobokengrace.com/give. If you have any questions, again, you can email me. Giving through stock, thinking about the CARES Act. Again, I think if anybody wants to talk through this, it's absolutely confidential. I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, for being part of this conversation. And I think for all of us, we want to make the most of what we've been given, make the most of the time that God has given us in this story, and to live that story as best as we can. And I just thank you for helping us to do that. I hope that you found this helpful. Again, we encourage you, if you do have a financial advisor, to consult them about what we've talked about, or tax advisor, to talk to them about that before we get late into the year, because for some of these, to be able to take some of these steps, to take advantage of some of this, it's things that need to happen. It's things that need to happen earlier as opposed to later. And there are some restrictions and some nuances to this. So, for example, if you're giving to a foundation that then distributes funds, or if you're giving to a DAF, the CARES Act doesn't actually apply to that giving. It has to be given directly to the nonprofit. And so those are things that you just need to keep in mind as we walk through this, in order to be able to make the most of what God's given us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Well, we hope that you enjoyed it. Have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.